Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Now, for today's video, I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind for a very long time. So just a few months ago, I did a video on the lack of Jurassic World games in the current marketplace. And in that video, I talked about how back when Jurassic Park and even The Lost World were new, there were a ton of different video games that fans had available for them to pick and choose from when it came to how they like to enjoy their own personal Jurassic experience. Whether it be platformers, strategy games, or even a tournament fighter, the Jurassic brand was more than just one single sort of gameplay style. And that made it really cool for people such as myself to go and pick up a new JP game, because you never really knew what kind of experience you were going to get. Well, one such experience that I think has both been lacking in recent years as well as in the brand's history as a whole is a game in the survival horror genre. Just to clarify, when I say survival horror, I'm talking about properties like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, or maybe even Outlast. Back when I was coming up, these types of games were still relatively new, and Jurassic was of course starting to dabble in them very early on with first-person experiences in the Visitor Center, in Jurassic Park games for the Super Nintendo, and Amiga PC systems. This sort of atmospheric style really suited the brand well because it was Jurassic Park. The very idea behind pretty much every character in the film and novel series has always been surviving situations and encounters with dangerous and unpredictable dinosaurs. It was part of Jurassic's branding, really. Well, never straight up horror 100%, it has always been horror adjacent. And I think that alone is important and warranting enough for us to get a game of that design. In the movies, usually in the second half, we see a lot of emphasis being put on people trying to survive being killed or eaten by raptors, tyrannosaurs, compies, and dilophosaurs. When I was super impressionable, the image of Eddie Carr being ripped in half by two angry T-Rexes scared the hell out of me, and the imagery of several hunters being yanked below tall blades of grass was creepy as well. This was one of the brand's well-known selling points. While the first Jurassic Park movie was most certainly accessible to everyone, with its sick Triceratops scenes and its beautiful Brachiosaur moments, The Lost World is where things got a little more dangerous in the wilds of Isla Sorna. And it kind of cranked its dino attacks up to 11 when everything was said and done. While Jurassic never really committed to this fully back in the day, they technically did experiment with these ideas in games like Trespasser, which was quite creepy and daunting when it wanted to be, or at least when it worked properly. Around the same time, characters like Regina made a name for themselves in titles like Dino Crisis, which was most definitely survival horror. In fact, the game even made a few references to its plot being similar to that of the first Jurassic Park movie. But with all of this being said, we still haven't really ever gotten a game of this caliber. And that kind of disappoints me, to be honest, because I see it as a massive missed opportunity. Instead, we've kind of only been given one new title in particular that's received a lot of fanfare, and that would be the park builder Jurassic World Evolution. Now, before I go any further, I need to make something clear. For a very long time, over a decade in fact, the newest Jurassic movie out was Jurassic Park 3, and the newest Jurassic game out was Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, which was a park builder. This was also a game that a lot of people grew a pretty serious attachment to during the lull time in new JP content. This is understandable because it was pretty much the only real thing there was for fans until the release of another simulation game, Jurassic Park Builder, and the 2011 Telltale release. Well, let me just say that before Operation Genesis and JP3, the brand had a lot more stuff going on. The first video game I ever got in my entire life was Jurassic Park Rampage Edition for the Sega Genesis. And the tone of the brand was quite different in those days than it eventually wound up being in the early 2000s. You see, when Jurassic Park 3 came out in 2001, it was being made with a sort of reactionary design that was very calculative and, let's say, different than The Lost World, which took the brand in a much darker and definitely more violent direction. When everything was said and done, JP3 had approximately 6 kills in its entire runtime, and none of them were exactly on the same level of violence that we got to see in the previous entry. That's not to say that none of them were good. I quite liked Cooper's death, although it is noticeably similar to the other Cooper's death from the aforementioned Dino Crisis. And the T-Rex getting killed by a bigger carnivore is also noticeably similar to Dino Crisis 2. But anyways, the video games that ultimately came out in support of JP3 reflected this different direction as well. Instead of titles like Warpath, Trespasser, or Lost World on PlayStation, we got Dino Defender, Scan Command, and JP3 Park Builder. Now, of course, there were more rated E-style games for the first 2 movies out in the 90s, but the vast majority of the content was much more horror adjacent back then. Enter Operation Genesis, which again, for the longest time, was the only new game that fans had to play in the franchise. If you were maybe a little bit younger than your older brothers and sisters that were playing some of the classic games, let's say you were born in the late 90s or early 2000s, you probably only had this game to really grow attached to, and it probably left a really big impact on your Jurassic Park experience as a fan. So when Jurassic World Evolution came out all those years later, it makes a lot of sense for that to be the game that fans rallied behind and loved to death in this new era of JP content. However, Jurassic World as a brand has kind of done something very different to JP3. When the first movie in the new trilogy came out in 2015, the kills were noticeably more graphic, bloody, and even controversial when compared to its immediate predecessor. Instead of characters getting their necks snapped or killed off screen when they entered a fog, people were now being hoisted up into trees and torn apart. Blood was splattered on the walls of laboratories, and a woman was even dropped from several feet into a park lagoon before she was eaten alive by a mosasaur. This caused a litany of complaints and criticism to be leveled at the movie for being a little too aggressive, with Colin Trevorrow even being called a sexist because of it. A few years later, Fallen Kingdom would offer up a hunter getting his arm bitten off and swallowed in front of him before he was similarly eaten alive by the Indoraptor. Eli Mills would have one of his legs ripped off before his other leg would get severed from what was left of the corpse and caught in the air by a Carnotaurus. We're pretty far removed from neck snapping at this point. But when it comes to supporting game content surrounding these films, it's not really that reflective of what we see go on in the movies. For example, Jurassic World Evolution really seems to be leaning in heavily on that Operation Genesis sort of inspiration, yet even that game features pretty minimalistic blood and gore when compared to its JP3 era counterpart. Jurassic has kind of gone back to its original sensibilities as far as the kills go. In fact, when you compare some of them to what goes down in the original Jurassic Park movie, they're a little more graphic than, say, Nedry or Joffrey's death, and more along the lines of Gennaro, Arnold, and most definitely Muldoon. So in a world where Jurassic Park has kind of entered into considerably darker and sometimes even atmospherically claustrophobic territories, inside of darkly lit mansions, might I add, why haven't we gotten a new survival horror game? From what I can tell, it's something that pretty much everyone wants at this point, specifically in the style of something like Alien Isolation. But for some reason, we still seem to be in the Operation Genesis emulation phase, which again was something from the era of Jurassic Park 3. I can't believe we had an entire movie where the plot was setting dinosaurs loose inside of a mansion where a genetic hybrid hunted people down and killed them, and we still wound up getting a brightly lit dinosaur caretaking experience. I do really like Jurassic World Evolution, but come on. Look, at the end of the day, I just personally think that Jurassic World really needs a survival horror game. I think it better reflects the material that they're showing in these films, and I think that it would offer up some diversity in the gameplay experiences that we currently have available. I don't dislike the fact that we're getting games that are heavily inspired by Operation Genesis. This is totally cool, and I'm happy to see stuff like that get made. But there are different types of Jurassic fans out there that are not all going to be in agreement with what the brand is, or has been, or should be. I come from an era where I wasn't allowed to go see The Lost World because my parents thought it would be too violent. I had to wait for it to come out on video. I played a lot of Rampage Edition and the PlayStation game when I was growing up. A vocal majority of what Jurassic fans are on the internet seems to be toy collectors and park building fans. That's cool, but that's not really how I personally choose to experience Jurassic. When it comes to collecting things, I want to get my hands on a Spaz 12 or maybe even Owen Grady's Marlin. I just bought a Wrangler recently that I'm going to try and turn into Muldoon's Jeep 10 if I ever get the chance. And I kind of want to play a game where I feel like I'm at the mercy of the chaotically created dinosaurs that are being spread out across the world, and not necessarily trying to build a happy park where everyone smiles and, you know, your feeder comes up and I've played that over and over again. I think with all of the people such as myself clamoring for something like this, it really needs to happen. But who knows, maybe we'll get one, maybe we won't. Anyways, what do all of you guys think about this subject? Are you in agreement with me on the fact that we could really use a more horror-driven video game in today's Jurassic World? Or do you think I'm crazy and that we're good with what we've got? Either way, whatever your own thoughts and opinions happen to be, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. Now, as always, this video wouldn't be possible without the support of my awesome game wardens, as well as all of my InGen executives. I'd also like to thank all of my park workers and InGen hunters as well. Their continued support has really been a lot of help to me when making this stuff, and I never want them to ever forget it. So a big thank you to each and every one of you for watching this video. If you feel like I deserve it, I'd appreciate the like and hope you'll consider subscribing if you're interested in seeing me again. I'll see you all in the next one, guys, and as always, take it easy.